Right now, as you're watching this video, there's an alien world beneath us that we know almost nothing about. We've explored less than 5% of our own oceans, yet we've mapped the entire surface of Mars. The deepest parts of our planet remain as mysterious and unreachable as distant galaxies. But here's what's truly shocking. It's not just about curiosity anymore. The secrets hidden in these crushing depths could hold the keys to our survival. New medicines that could save millions, and resources that could change everything. Yet every time we try to reach them, the ocean fights back with a fury that makes space look like a gentle playground. If you're ready to dive into the most terrifying and fascinating mystery on Earth, hit that like button to support this journey into the abyss, and let's uncover why the deep sea remains humanity's final frontier. Because what we're about to discover will change how you see our planet forever. Imagine being slowly compressed by an invisible force so powerful that your entire body would be crushed into a space smaller than a marble. This isn't science fiction. This is what happens to anything that dares to venture into the deep ocean without proper protection. The first and most brutal barrier preventing us from exploring the deep sea isn't some mythical sea monster or technological limitation. It's the sheer, overwhelming weight of water itself, pressing down with a force so immense that it defies human comprehension. To understand why the deep ocean remains largely unexplored, we need to grasp the concept of pressure. And trust me, the numbers will blow your mind. At sea level, we experience atmospheric pressure of about 14.7 pounds per square inch. Your body is perfectly adapted to this pressure. You don't even notice it. But here's where things get terrifying. For every 33 feet you descend into the ocean, the pressure increases by another full atmosphere. Think about that for a moment. Just 33 feet down, the pressure has already doubled. At 66 feet, it's tripled. By the time you reach 330 feet, barely scratching the surface of what we consider the deep ocean, the pressure is already 10 times greater than what your body can handle. But we're just getting started, because the ocean doesn't stop at 330 feet. The average depth of our oceans is about 1,200 feet, where the pressure reaches a staggering 370 times greater than at sea level. That's equivalent to having 50 jumbo jets pressing down on every square meter of surface. Your lungs would collapse instantly. Your bones would shatter like glass. Every air-filled cavity in your body would be crushed beyond recognition. And that's not even close to the deepest parts of the ocean. The Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of our oceans, plunges down to an unimaginable 36,200 feet. At this depth, the pressure reaches over 1,100 times atmospheric pressure. That's more than 16,000 pounds per square inch pressing down on every single square inch of surface. To put this in perspective, imagine the weight of 1,600 elephants standing on top of your car. Now multiply that crushing force across every inch of your body simultaneously. This is why only specially designed submersibles with walls several inches thick can even attempt to reach these depths. And even then, many of them are crushed like tin cans by forces they weren't designed to withstand. The pressure at these depths is so extreme that it actually changes the fundamental properties of water itself. Water, which we think of as incompressible, actually becomes denser under this immense pressure. The water at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is about 4% denser than the water at the surface. This might not sound like much, but it creates a cascade of effects that make exploration even more challenging. Equipment designed for surface conditions, behaves completely differently under this pressure. Electronics fail in ways engineers never anticipated. Materials that are incredibly strong at the surface become brittle and unpredictable when subjected to these crushing forces. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Despite these impossible conditions, life not only exists at these depths, but thrives in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about biology. Creatures living in the deepest parts of the ocean have evolved extraordinary adaptations to survive pressures that would instantly kill any surface dweller. Their cell membranes are fundamentally different. Their proteins are structured in ways that seem impossible, and their entire physiology operates on principles that we're only beginning to understand. These organisms don't just tolerate the crushing pressure, they require it to survive. Bring them to the surface, and they die just as quickly as we would die if transported to their world. The engineering challenges created by this pressure are staggering. Every material used in deep-sea exploration must be tested and retested under conditions that are nearly impossible to replicate on land. The slightest weakness, the tiniest air bubble, the smallest imperfection in a seal can result in catastrophic failure. The famous bathysphere, one of the first vessels to reach significant depths, had walls that were over an inch thick and windows made of quartz 3 inches thick. Even then, explorers reported hearing the hull groan and crack under the pressure, never knowing if the next descent would be their last. Modern deep-sea submersibles are marvels of engineering, but they're also incredibly limited by the pressure problem. The Alvin, one of the most famous deep-sea research submarines, has a sphere made of titanium that weighs over 31,000 pounds just to protect 3 people from the crushing depths. The walls of this sphere are nearly 2 inches thick, and even then, it can only safely descend to about 14,000 feet, not even half the depth of the deepest ocean trenches. Every piece of equipment, every camera, every scientific instrument must be housed in its own pressure-resistant container, making each expedition incredibly expensive and logistically complex. The pressure also creates secondary problems that cascade into other challenges. Communications equipment fails under pressure. Cameras fog up and malfunction. Robotic arms become sluggish or stop working entirely. Even something as simple as collecting a sample becomes monumentally difficult when every tool must be designed to withstand forces that would crush a car. Many of the greatest discoveries in deep-sea exploration have been accidents. Equipment failing in unexpected ways that revealed something new about the ocean depths. Perhaps most frustrating of all, the pressure makes it nearly impossible to bring samples back to the surface intact. Deep-sea creatures that have evolved to live under crushing pressure literally explode when brought to lower pressures. Their swim bladders expand and burst. Their cell membranes rupture. Their entire biological structure, perfectly adapted for the deep, fails catastrophically when exposed to our world. This means that many of the life forms we've discovered in the deep ocean have never been studied alive at the surface. We know they exist because we've seen them briefly through camera feeds before our equipment fails, but we can't bring them back to study them properly. The pressure problem also means that human exploration of the deep sea is incredibly dangerous and limited. Unlike space exploration, where we can at least survive in a spacesuit for limited periods, there's no suit that can protect a human being from the crushing depths of the ocean. Every human who has ever visited the deep sea has done so inside a pressure vessel, completely isolated from the environment they're trying to study. This separation creates a barrier between us and the deep ocean that we've never been able to overcome. We're always looking at the deep sea through a window, never able to truly experience or interact with this alien world that covers most of our own planet. As we continue our journey into understanding why the deep sea remains so mysterious, remember that this crushing pressure is just the beginning. It's the first of many deadly barriers that stand between us and the secrets of the deep. But what we've discovered, despite these challenges, hints at wonders beyond imagination and horrors that might be better left undisturbed. The pressure isn't just a physical barrier. It's nature's way of protecting secrets that could change everything we know about life on Earth. Just when you think the crushing pressure is the worst thing the deep ocean can throw at you, nature reveals its next cruel trick. Temperature extremes so severe they would kill you in minutes, sometimes in ways that seem to defy the laws of physics themselves. The deep sea isn't just cold, it's a realm where water can simultaneously freeze your body solid and boil your blood, sometimes within yards of each other. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's a temperature hellscape that makes the surface of Mars look hospitable. Let's start with the bone-chilling reality that awaits anyone venturing into the deep ocean. As you descend past the sunlit surface waters, the temperature drops rapidly and relentlessly. By the time you reach 1,000 feet, the water temperature has plummeted to around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. But this is only the beginning of your journey into a frozen wasteland that stretches for miles below. At 13,000 feet, the average depth of most ocean basins, the water temperature hovers between 35 and 37 degrees Fahrenheit. We're talking about water so cold that it would kill an unprotected human being in less than 15 minutes through hypothermia. But here's where the deep ocean reveals just how alien it truly is. This isn't ordinary cold water. This is water that exists in conditions so extreme that it behaves in ways that challenge our basic understanding of physics. Under the immense pressure of the deep sea, water can remain liquid at temperatures well below its normal freezing point. In the deepest trenches, water exists at temperatures of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, technically below freezing. But the pressure is so intense that ice cannot form. It's like being trapped in a liquid that should be solid, in a world where the normal rules of matter don't apply. This frigid environment creates problems that engineers never anticipated when they first started designing deep-sea equipment. Electronics that work perfectly at room temperature become sluggish and unreliable in the extreme cold. Batteries drain at alarming rates. Hydraulic fluids thicken to the consistency of molasses, making robotic arms move like they're trapped in slow motion. Metal components contract and warp, creating gaps in seals that were perfect at the surface. The cold doesn't just make exploration uncomfortable, it actively fights against every piece of technology we send into the depths. But just when you think you understand the temperature challenge of the deep ocean, nature throws you a curveball that seems impossible. Scattered across the ocean floor like alien beacons are hydrothermal vents, underwater geysers that spew water at temperatures that would melt lead. These vents release water heated by the Earth's molten core to temperatures exceeding 750 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt zinc, hot enough to cause third-degree burns instantly, hot enough to kill any known form of life on the surface. Yet these vents exist in an environment where the surrounding water is barely above freezing. The temperature differential around these vents is so extreme, it creates its own weather system on the ocean floor. Imagine standing in an environment where you could literally freeze to death and be scalded to death simultaneously, depending on which direction you move. The superheated water from these vents creates massive thermal gradients that cause currents, eddies, and temperature boundaries so sharp they're like invisible walls of death. Move too close to the vent, and you're cooked alive. Move too far away, and the crushing cold claims you instead. These hydrothermal vents reveal another terrifying aspect of deep-sea temperature extremes. The water coming out of them isn't just hot, it's chemically altered by its journey through the Earth's crust. This superheated water is loaded with dissolved metals, sulfur compounds, and other chemicals that make it more toxic than battery acid. The combination of extreme heat and chemical toxicity creates an environment so hostile that it seems impossible anything could survive there. Yet, incredibly, these vents support some of the most abundant life on the deep ocean floor. Creatures that have evolved to not just tolerate these conditions, but to thrive in them. The engineering challenges created by these temperature extremes are mind-boggling. How do you design equipment that can function in water that's barely above freezing one moment and hot enough to melt copper the next? Traditional materials become brittle in the extreme cold and lose their strength in the extreme heat. Seals that work perfectly at room temperature fail catastrophically when subjected to rapid temperature changes. Electronics that are designed to operate in controlled environments simply can't cope with the thermal shock of moving from near freezing water to superheated vent fields. The thermal properties of the deep ocean also create problems with basic physics that we take for granted on the surface. Heat transfer works differently under extreme pressure and in near freezing water. Convection currents behave unpredictably. The specific heat capacity of water changes under these conditions, meaning that equipment designed to dissipate heat or retain warmth based on surface physics simply doesn't work as expected. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's a fundamental breakdown of the engineering principles that allow us to build reliable equipment. Perhaps most frustrating of all, the temperature extremes make it nearly impossible to study the most interesting aspects of deep-sea life. The creatures living around hydrothermal vents have evolved the most extraordinary adaptations to survive in these impossible conditions. Some have proteins that remain stable at temperatures that would denature every protein in your body. Others have specialized organs that can detect tiny temperature changes, allowing them to navigate the deadly thermal landscape around the vents. But bringing these creatures to the surface for study means subjecting them to temperature changes that are instantly lethal. They die before we can understand how they lived. The temperature challenge also extends to the basic logistics of deep-sea exploration. Every piece of equipment must be pre-chilled before deployment to prevent thermal shock when it hits the frigid deep water. But this pre-chilling can cause condensation and ice formation that damages sensitive electronics. Heating elements designed to keep equipment warm drain precious battery power and create their own set of problems. The thermal management of deep-sea vehicles is a constant balancing act between preventing equipment failure from cold and not running out of power trying to stay warm. The thermal stratification of the deep ocean creates invisible barriers that can trap equipment and make navigation treacherous. These thermoclines, layers of water at different temperatures, can cause instruments to malfunction and create optical illusions that make it impossible to judge distances accurately. Submarines have been lost because their crews couldn't accurately gauge their position relative to the ocean floor due to thermal distortions in the water. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the deep ocean's temperature extremes isn't just how cold the water is, it's how quickly it steals heat from anything warm. The combination of extreme cold, high pressure, and constant water movement creates a heat sink so efficient that it can drain the warmth from heated equipment in minutes. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's a race against time. Every minute spent in the deep ocean is a minute closer to equipment failure as the relentless cold penetrates deeper into systems designed to stay warm. The temperature extremes of the deep ocean also reveal something profound about our planet's energy systems. The hydrothermal vents aren't just geological curiosities, they're windows into the massive energy systems operating beneath the ocean floor. The Earth's core is constantly heating water to extreme temperatures and forcing it up through cracks in the seafloor. This process has been going on for billions of years, creating and sustaining ecosystems that operate on principles completely different from the sun-powered systems we know on the surface. These vent communities represent an entirely different way life can exist on a planet, one that doesn't depend on sunlight, but on the internal heat of the planet itself. As we'll discover in our continuing exploration of the deep sea's barriers, the temperature extremes aren't just another obstacle. They're a fundamental part of what makes the deep ocean the most alien environment on our own planet. The creatures that have learned to survive in these conditions have evolved solutions to problems we didn't even know existed. But studying these solutions means overcoming temperature challenges that push our technology and our understanding to their absolute limits. The deep ocean doesn't just hide its secrets behind crushing pressure. It guards them with temperature extremes that can kill in seconds and create conditions that seem to violate the basic laws of physics themselves. If the crushing pressure doesn't kill you, and the temperature extremes don't finish the job, the deep ocean has one more deadly surprise waiting. An invisible army of chemicals so toxic they make the most polluted industrial sites on Earth look like pristine gardens. The deep sea isn't just physically hostile, it's chemically warfare on a scale that would make any toxicologist's blood run cold. We're talking about an environment where the water itself is poison, where every breath of dissolved gas could be your last, and where the very substances that make life possible on the surface become instruments of death in the abyss. Let's start with hydrogen sulfide, a gas so deadly that it's killed more deep-sea researchers and equipment operators than any sea monster ever could. In the areas around hydrothermal vents, this invisible killer is released in concentrations that would be instantly lethal to any surface dweller. Just a few parts per million of hydrogen sulfide in the air you breathe would cause immediate unconsciousness and death within minutes. But in the deep ocean around active vents, we're not talking about parts per million. We're talking about concentrations so high they turn the water itself into a toxic soup that corrodes metal and dissolves organic compounds on contact. Hydrogen sulfide doesn't just kill through toxicity, it's also incredibly corrosive. This gas attacks metals with a ferocity that engineers are still struggling to understand. Equipment that should last for years in normal ocean conditions fails within hours when exposed to high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide. The gas literally eats through steel, corrodes copper wiring, and destroys electronic components in ways that seem almost intelligent in their destructiveness. It's like the deep ocean is actively trying to prevent us from exploring it, using chemical weapons that target both biological life and the technology we depend on for survival. But hydrogen sulfide is just the beginning of the deep ocean's chemical arsenal. Methane hydrates, frozen deposits of natural gas, are scattered across the ocean floor like buried landmines waiting to explode. These crystalline structures look harmless, almost beautiful in their geometric perfection. But they represent one of the most dangerous chemical hazards in the deep sea. When disturbed by submarines or drilling equipment, these hydrates can release massive amounts of methane gas in explosive decompression events that have sunk research vessels and killed entire crews. The methane released from these hydrates isn't just explosive, it's also a powerful asphyxiant that can displace oxygen in enclosed spaces. Submarines that accidentally trigger a methane hydrate release have found their life support systems overwhelmed by gas concentrations that make breathing impossible. The methane doesn't just threaten human life directly, it also interferes with the combustion engines and electrical systems that deep-sea vehicles depend on for power and propulsion. Equipment failure in the deep ocean isn't just inconvenient, it's a death sentence. Carbon dioxide presents another invisible threat that makes the deep ocean a chemical nightmare. In the crushing depths, where pressure reaches extreme levels, CO2 behaves in ways that defy our surface-based understanding of this common gas. Under high pressure, carbon dioxide can exist in a liquid state that's denser than water, creating invisible pockets of suffocating gas that sink to the ocean floor. These CO2 lakes are like underwater quicksand, invisible traps that can overwhelm the life support systems of any vehicle unfortunate enough to enter them. The deep ocean's chemical toxicity isn't limited to gases. Heavy metals dissolved in seawater reach concentrations in the deep that would be considered hazardous waste on the surface. Lead, mercury, cadmium, and other toxic elements are concentrated by deep-sea processes into levels that can poison both biological organisms and electronic systems. These metals don't just threaten life directly. They also interfere with the sensitive instruments that deep-sea explorers depend on for navigation, communication, and scientific measurement. Perhaps most insidious of all are the organic toxins produced by deep-sea organisms themselves. Many creatures living in the abyss have evolved to produce chemical compounds that would be instantly lethal to surface dwellers. These biotoxins are so potent that even tiny amounts can cause paralysis, respiratory failure, and death within minutes. Some of these toxins are completely unknown to surface-based medicine. There are no antidotes, no treatments, no way to counteract their effects if exposure occurs. The chemical environment of the deep ocean also creates problems with basic life support that engineers never anticipated. Oxygen behaves differently under extreme pressure, and the chemical reactions that scrub carbon dioxide from breathable air don't work the same way in the deep ocean environment. Life support systems that work perfectly on the surface can fail catastrophically when subjected to the unique chemical conditions of the abyss. Crew members have suffocated in submarines not because their oxygen ran out, but because the chemical systems designed to keep their air breathable stopped functioning properly under deep-sea conditions. The corrosive nature of the deep-sea chemical environment means that every piece of equipment must be built with materials and coatings that can resist chemical attack. But these protective measures add weight, reduce functionality, and increase cost exponentially. A simple camera housing that might cost hundreds of dollars for surface use can cost tens of thousands when it needs to be protected from the chemical assault of the deep ocean. Even then, the protection is temporary. The chemicals are always winning, always finding new ways to penetrate defenses and destroy equipment. The interaction between different toxic chemicals in the deep ocean creates compound effects that are even more dangerous than individual toxins. Hydrogen sulfide combined with heavy metals creates corrosive compounds that attack materials in ways that neither substance could alone. Methane mixed with carbon dioxide creates gas mixtures that are both explosive and suffocating simultaneously. The deep ocean isn't just toxic, it's a chemistry laboratory from hell, where different poisons combine and react to create new forms of lethality. Temperature changes in the deep ocean can also trigger the sudden release of dissolved gases in ways that can overwhelm life support systems without warning. A submarine moving from cold deep water into a warm thermal plume can experience rapid outgassing that floods compartments with toxic vapors. These chemical surprises have been responsible for some of the most mysterious equipment failures and crew deaths in deep-sea exploration history. The long-term exposure effects of deep-sea chemicals are still largely unknown because so few humans have spent extended time in this environment. The protective barriers that keep explorers alive also prevent us from studying how prolonged exposure to these conditions might affect human health. Some researchers who have spent careers working with deep-sea materials have developed unusual medical conditions that doctors struggle to explain or treat. Even more troubling is the discovery that some deep-sea chemicals can penetrate the protective barriers of submarines and diving equipment through mechanisms that scientists are still trying to understand. Certain organic compounds seem to pass through materials that should be impermeable, suggesting that the deep ocean has evolved chemical weapons that can defeat our best defensive technologies. The chemical toxicity of the deep ocean also makes it nearly impossible to study the biology of deep-sea life in meaningful ways. Bringing samples to the surface means exposing them to completely different chemical conditions that alter their cellular structure and kill them before meaningful study can take place. Many of the most interesting chemical adaptations of deep-sea life remain mysteries because we can't observe them in their natural chemical environment. Perhaps most frightening of all is the realization that we've only identified a fraction of the toxic chemicals present in the deep ocean. Every new exploration mission discovers new compounds, new toxins, new chemical hazards that we never knew existed. The deep ocean is a vast chemical library of substances that could kill us in ways we haven't even imagined yet. Some of these chemicals might be useful for medical or industrial applications, but we can't study them safely, and we can't predict their effects on human physiology or technology. As we continue our journey into understanding why the deep sea remains largely unexplored, remember that the chemical toxicity isn't just another obstacle. It's an active defense system that makes every moment spent in the deep ocean a race against chemical death. The creatures that live in this toxic environment have evolved over millions of years to not just tolerate these conditions, but to use them as tools for survival. Meanwhile, our technology, designed for the relatively benign chemical environment of the surface world, struggles to function for even brief periods in this chemical warfare zone that covers most of our planet. Imagine being trapped in a darkness so complete, so absolute, that it makes the darkest night on the surface seem bright as day. This isn't just the absence of light. This is a blackness so profound it becomes a living thing, pressing against you, disorienting you, driving explorers to madness and making navigation impossible through methods that have worked for centuries above water. The deep ocean exists in a state of perpetual midnight that has never been broken by a single ray of sunlight in billions of years, creating an environment so alien to human experience that our minds struggle to process what our instruments are telling us. The descent into this absolute darkness begins much sooner than most people realize. Sunlight, the energy source that powers virtually all life on Earth's surface, begins its death spiral the moment it touches the ocean's surface. The brilliant reds and oranges that paint our sunsets are the first casualties, absorbed by seawater within just a few feet of the surface. By 30 feet down, the warm yellows that make shallow tropical waters so inviting have been swallowed entirely. At 100 feet, even the blues and greens that seem to define the ocean itself begin to fade into something dimmer, more ominous. But this is still just the beginning of your journey into the abyss. By the time you reach 660 feet, what marine biologists call the dysphotic zone, you're entering a twilight realm where only the faintest traces of sunlight can penetrate. This isn't the gentle twilight of evening. This is a dying of the light that signals your entry into an alien world. The last photons of sunlight that make it this deep are so weak they couldn't power even the most primitive photosynthesis. You're entering a realm where the sun might as well not exist. At 3,300 feet, you cross the threshold into what scientists call the aphotic zone, the realm of eternal night. Here, not a single photon of sunlight has ever penetrated. The darkness isn't just complete, it's ancient, stretching back through geological ages to the very formation of the oceans themselves. This is darkness that has never been broken, a blackness so absolute that it challenges our most basic understanding of vision and navigation. In this realm, the concept of day and night becomes meaningless. There is only the endless, crushing dark. The psychological impact of this absolute darkness on human explorers cannot be overstated. Humans evolved in a world of light and shadow, of day and night cycles that regulate our biology and psychology. When deep-sea explorers first encountered this total darkness, many reported experiences that bordered on hallucinations. The human brain, desperate to make sense of the complete absence of visual input, begins creating phantom images, false movements, and optical illusions that can lead to disorientation and panic. Some explorers have reported seeing lights that weren't there, movements in the darkness that their instruments couldn't detect, and a creeping sense of being watched by invisible entities. The darkness creates navigation challenges that make surface exploration look simple by comparison. On the surface, we navigate by landmarks, by the position of the sun and stars, by visual reference points that have guided human exploration for millennia. In the deep ocean, all of these methods become useless. Compasses can be unreliable due to magnetic anomalies in the ocean floor. GPS signals cannot penetrate water. Visual navigation is impossible when you can't see beyond the weak cone of light projected by your submersible's floodlights. The artificial lights that deep-sea vehicles carry create their own set of problems that engineers are still trying to solve. These lights must be incredibly powerful to penetrate even a few yards into the absolute darkness. But powerful lights drain battery power at alarming rates. Every minute of illumination is precious power that could be used for life support, propulsion, or communication. The lights also create harsh shadows and optical distortions that make it difficult to judge distances and navigate safely around obstacles on the ocean floor. But perhaps most disturbing of all is how the darkness affects the behavior of deep sea life itself. The creatures that inhabit this eternal night have evolved in ways that seem almost supernatural to surface dwellers. Many have developed their own bioluminescent organs, creating living constellations of light that flicker and pulse in patterns we're only beginning to understand. These biological lights aren't just beautiful, they're communication systems, hunting tools, and defense mechanisms that operate on principles completely foreign to surface biology. The bioluminescence of deep-sea creatures creates a paradox that challenges our understanding of life in darkness. In a realm where light should not exist, evolution has created living beings that generate their own illumination through chemical processes that seem almost magical. These lights can be triggered by threats, used to attract prey, or employed to communicate with members of their own species across vast distances in the dark. Some creatures can create light patterns so complex they resemble alien writing, suggesting forms of communication that we may never fully comprehend. The darkness also makes it incredibly difficult to study the behavior of deep-sea life in their natural state. The moment artificial lights illuminate these creatures, their behavior changes dramatically. Animals that have evolved in complete darkness for millions of years react to artificial light as if it were a supernatural phenomenon. Some flee in terror, others are attracted like moths to a flame, and still others seem to go into shock from the sensory overload of experiencing light for the first time in their evolutionary history. The technical challenges created by the absolute darkness extend far beyond simple navigation. Cameras designed for surface use are completely useless in the deep ocean. Even the most sensitive low-light cameras require some source of illumination to function, and providing that illumination in the deep ocean requires massive amounts of power and specialized equipment that adds weight, complexity, and cost to every mission. The cameras that do work in these conditions often produce images that are stark and alien, with harsh contrasts between the illuminated areas and the impenetrable blackness beyond. The darkness makes it nearly impossible to conduct comprehensive surveys of the ocean floor. Surface mappers can use satellite imagery and aerial photography to chart vast areas quickly and accurately. In the deep ocean, every square foot must be painstakingly illuminated and photographed individually, a process so slow and power-intensive that mapping even small areas of the ocean floor can take years of dedicated effort. This is why we have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of our own ocean floors. The darkness makes comprehensive mapping logistically impossible with current technology. The perpetual darkness also creates problems with depth perception that can be deadly for deep-sea explorers. Without visual reference points, it becomes incredibly difficult to judge how far you are from the ocean floor, from underwater mountains, or from other obstacles that could damage or destroy your submersible. Many accidents in deep-sea exploration have been caused by pilots misjudging distances in the darkness, flying too close to geological formations, or colliding with obstacles they couldn't see until it was too late. The darkness affects even the most basic aspects of scientific research in the deep ocean. Collecting samples becomes a complex operation requiring precision, robotic arms, and navigation systems when you can't simply see what you're trying to collect. Measuring distances, estimating sizes, and conducting visual surveys all become exponentially more difficult when you're working in absolute darkness with only a small cone of artificial light to guide you. Perhaps most haunting of all is the realization that this darkness extends across the majority of our planet's surface. The deep ocean covers more than 60% of Earth's surface area, meaning that most of our world exists in a state of perpetual midnight that no human eye has ever seen in its natural state. We live on a planet where darkness, not light, is the dominant condition, where the familiar world of sunshine and blue skies exists only as a thin shell covering a vast realm of eternal night. The darkness of the deep ocean also raises profound questions about what else might be lurking in those unexplored depths. If creatures can evolve to create their own light, what other impossible adaptations might exist in the darkness we haven't discovered yet? What forms of life might thrive in conditions so alien to surface experience that we lack the sensory equipment to detect them? The darkness doesn't just hide the deep ocean from our exploration. It suggests the possibility of entire ecosystems, entire forms of life that might exist just beyond the reach of our lights, invisible and unknowable in the perpetual night that covers most of our world. As we continue to explore the barriers that keep the deep ocean mysterious, remember that the darkness isn't just the absence of light, it's the presence of the unknown, stretching away in all directions beyond the weak glow of our artificial suns, holding secrets that may be stranger and more wonderful than anything we've discovered in the small circles of light we've managed to create in the abyss. If you think you understand the destructive power of salt water because you've seen what it does to cars near the beach or boats left in the marina, prepare to have your understanding completely shattered. The corrosive assault of deep-sea salt water is so aggressive, so relentless, and so chemically violent that it makes surface corrosion look like a gentle caress. We're talking about an environment where the very water itself is a universal solvent on steroids, attacking every material known to humanity with a persistence that borders on the supernatural, turning the most advanced alloys into crumbling rust and reducing million-dollar equipment to worthless scrap in a matter of months. The salt water of the deep ocean isn't just the familiar sodium chloride that seasons your food. It's a complex chemical cocktail that becomes more concentrated and more aggressive as you descend into the abyss. Under the crushing pressure of the deep sea, salt concentrations increase, and the water becomes saturated with minerals and elements that create corrosive compounds of incredible potency. Magnesium chloride, calcium sulfate, and dozens of other dissolved salts combine under pressure to create what's essentially a liquid that eats metal for breakfast and asks for seconds. The electrochemical reactions that drive corrosion in the deep ocean operate under conditions that amplify their destructive power exponentially. The high pressure increases the solubility of metals, allowing the salt water to dissolve protective coatings and attack the underlying materials more efficiently. The cold temperatures slow down some chemical reactions, but accelerate others, creating unpredictable corrosion patterns that engineers struggle to anticipate. Meanwhile, the complete absence of oxygen in many deep-sea environments creates anaerobic conditions that promote entirely different types of corrosion that can't be replicated or studied in surface laboratories. Steel, the backbone of industrial civilization, becomes pathetically vulnerable in the deep ocean environment. The high-strength steel alloys used in submarine construction can lose significant structural integrity within months of exposure to deep-sea conditions. The salt water doesn't just attack the surface, it penetrates deep into the metal's crystalline structure, causing stress corrosion cracking that can lead to catastrophic failure without warning. Submarines that should last for decades find their hulls compromised by corrosion that seems to accelerate beyond all engineering predictions. Aluminum, prized for its natural corrosion resistance on the surface, reveals a shocking vulnerability in the deep ocean that has surprised materials scientists. The protective oxide layer that makes aluminum corrosion resistant in air becomes unstable under the high-pressure, high-salinity conditions of the deep sea. Aluminum components that should last for years can fail within weeks, sometimes developing pitting corrosion so severe that structural components become Swiss cheese, riddled with holes that grow larger with each passing day. The advanced titanium alloys used in the most sophisticated deep-sea vehicles aren't immune to the ocean's corrosive assault either. While titanium performs better than most metals in salt water, the extreme conditions of the deep ocean can still cause titanium to develop stress corrosion cracking, especially at weld joints and areas of high mechanical stress. Even more troubling, titanium can experience hydrogen embrittlement in the deep ocean environment, where dissolved hydrogen penetrates the metal's structure and makes it brittle and prone to sudden failure. But the corrosion problem extends far beyond the structural materials of submarines and research vessels. Every electronic component, every sensor, every piece of scientific equipment must be protected from salt water that seems to find ways through seals and barriers that should be impermeable. The salt water doesn't just cause corrosion. It creates electrical shorts, interferes with magnetic sensors, and deposits salt crystals that can jam mechanical components and block optical systems. The protective coatings and treatments designed to prevent corrosion face their own set of challenges in the deep ocean environment. Paints and polymer coatings that work perfectly on the surface can become brittle and crack under the pressure changes experienced during descent and ascent. Once cracks appear, salt water penetrates behind the protective coating and causes corrosion that's even more severe than if the metal had been left unprotected. Some protective coatings actually accelerate corrosion in deep-sea conditions by creating galvanic cells that increase the electrochemical activity at the metal surface. The problem of galvanic corrosion becomes especially severe in the deep ocean, where different metals in contact with each other create electrical currents that dramatically accelerate the destruction of the less noble metal. A simple steel bolt holding an aluminum component can create a galvanic cell that eats through the aluminum at rates that seem impossible. Engineers must carefully consider the galvanic compatibility of every material used in deep-sea equipment. But even materials that should be compatible can behave unpredictably under the extreme conditions of the abyss. Saltwater corrosion in the deep ocean also creates secondary problems that cascade into system failures. Corrosion products, the rust, oxidation, and chemical byproducts of metal degradation, can clog filters, jam valves, and interfere with the operation of critical systems. These corrosion products can be carried by water currents throughout a submarine's systems, causing failures in components that haven't even been directly exposed to seawater. It's like a metallic cancer that spreads throughout the vehicle, attacking systems that should be safe inside protective hulls. The rate of corrosion in the deep ocean often exceeds engineering predictions by factors of 10 or more. Equipment that's designed to last for years based on surface testing and accelerated corrosion studies can fail within months when exposed to actual deep-sea conditions. This unpredictability makes it nearly impossible to plan long-term missions or establish permanent research stations on the ocean floor. Every piece of equipment is on borrowed time, racing against corrosion that's constantly eating away at the materials that keep explorers alive. Even more frustrating is the discovery that different areas of the deep ocean have dramatically different corrosive properties. Saltwater corrosion that proceeds at a predictable rate in one location can accelerate wildly in another area just miles away. Local chemistry, mineral content, temperature variations, and biological activity all influence corrosion rates in ways that make it impossible to create universal protection strategies. Each deep-sea mission becomes a unique corrosion experiment with potentially deadly consequences. The biological aspects of deep-sea corrosion add another layer of complexity that engineers are still struggling to understand. Certain deep-sea bacteria and other microorganisms can accelerate corrosion through biological processes that consume protective coatings and create corrosive byproducts. These microorganisms can form biofilms on metal surfaces that concentrate corrosive chemicals and create localized conditions that are even more aggressive than the surrounding seawater. Some bacteria actually use metals as food sources, literally eating through protective barriers and structural components. The economic impact of saltwater corrosion in deep-sea exploration is staggering. Every mission must budget for equipment, replacement, and repair costs that can exceed the original purchase price within months. Research vessels spend more money on corrosion prevention and repair than on actual scientific equipment. The short lifespan of deep-sea equipment means that much of the cost of ocean exploration goes toward replacing corroded components rather than advancing our understanding of the deep ocean. Perhaps most troubling of all is the discovery that corrosion in the deep ocean can proceed through mechanisms that aren't fully understood by materials science. Some deep-sea equipment has failed due to corrosion patterns that can't be replicated in laboratory conditions, suggesting that the deep ocean environment creates corrosive conditions that we haven't been able to identify or study. These unknown corrosion mechanisms represent a fundamental gap in our understanding of how materials behave under extreme conditions. The search for corrosion-resistant materials for deep-sea use has led to the development of exotic alloys and protective systems that cost thousands of dollars per pound. These advanced materials perform better than conventional alloys, but they're still vulnerable to the aggressive chemistry of the deep ocean. Some of the most promising corrosion-resistant materials are so expensive that using them makes deep-sea exploration economically unfeasible for all but the most critical applications. The corrosive power of deep-sea saltwater also affects the recovery and analysis of samples brought back from the abyss. Containers that are corroded during the collection process can contaminate samples or allow them to be lost entirely. Even samples that survive the collection process can be altered by corrosion products from their containers, making scientific analysis difficult or impossible. The very act of bringing deep-sea samples to the surface exposes them to corrosion conditions that can destroy the evidence we're trying to study. As our exploration of the deep ocean's barriers continues, remember that saltwater corrosion isn't just an engineering inconvenience. It's an active force that's constantly working to reclaim every piece of human technology that ventures into the abyss. The ocean, has been perfecting its corrosive chemistry for billions of years, creating an environment so hostile to metal and technology that it represents one of the most challenging material science problems on Earth. Every bolt, every weld, every electronic connection is under constant chemical attack from water that seems designed to dissolve the very tools we need to explore it. Just when you think the physical and chemical barriers of the deep ocean are the most terrifying obstacles to exploration, nature reveals its most unsettling surprise. Creatures so alien, so impossible, and so fundamentally different from anything that exists on the surface that they challenge our most basic understanding of what life can be. These aren't just unusual animals living in a harsh environment. These are biological impossibilities that have evolved solutions to survival problems we didn't even know existed. Some of these creatures are so bizarre that encountering them feels like making first contact with extraterrestrial life, except the aliens have been living on our own planet all along, hidden in the darkness beneath our feet. The deep ocean is populated by creatures that seem designed by a mad scientist with unlimited imagination and no concern for the laws of physics or biology. Take the vampire squid, a living contradiction that challenges everything we think we know about cephalopods. This creature can literally turn itself inside out when threatened, exposing spines and bioluminescent photophores in patterns so alien they look like something from a nightmare. But here's what makes it truly impossible. The vampire squid can survive in oxygen conditions so low they would kill virtually any other complex life form on Earth. It thrives in water, with oxygen levels that are literally toxic to surface organisms, suggesting metabolic processes that operate on principles completely foreign to surface biology. Even more disturbing are the deep-sea anglerfish, creatures that have evolved hunting strategies so bizarre they read like horror fiction. The female anglerfish carries a bioluminescent lure that dangles in front of its mouth like a deadly beacon in the absolute darkness. But the truly unsettling part isn't the lure, it's what happens to the males. Male anglerfish are tiny parasites that bite onto the female and literally fuse with her body, becoming nothing more than a sperm-producing organ attached to her flesh. Their circulatory systems merge, their tissues integrate, and the male loses all independent existence. It's biological horror that makes the most disturbing science fiction seem tame by comparison. The giant tube worms that cluster around hydrothermal vents represent perhaps the most impossible life forms on our planet. These creatures can grow to over 8 feet in length, yet they have no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system whatsoever. They survive entirely through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that live inside their bodies and convert toxic chemicals into energy through chemosynthesis. These bacteria process hydrogen sulfide, a compound so poisonous it would kill surface organisms instantly, and turn it into food. The tube worms are essentially living chemical processing plants, biological factories that thrive on poisons that make industrial waste look benign. But perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of these creatures is their apparent immortality. Many deep-sea organisms show no signs of aging in ways that surface biologists can understand. Some deep-sea clams and tube worms have been carbon dated to be hundreds of years old, possibly even thousands. They seem to exist in a state of biological suspended animation, growing incredibly slowly, but showing no signs of the cellular degradation that causes aging in surface organisms. These creatures have potentially discovered the secret to biological immortality, but studying them requires us to overcome all the other barriers that make the deep ocean so inaccessible. The defensive mechanisms evolved by deep-sea creatures are so extreme they border on the supernatural. The deep-sea cucumber can literally liquefy its own body when threatened, dissolving into a puddle of organic matter that can later regenerate into a complete organism. Other deep-sea creatures can detach and regenerate entire body parts at will, regrow lost limbs in ways that make surface regeneration abilities look primitive, and survive injuries that would be instantly fatal to any surface organism. Some can even survive being completely frozen solid, entering a state of cryptobiosis that allows them to endure conditions that should be absolutely lethal. The bioluminescence capabilities of deep-sea creatures create light shows that seem to violate the laws of physics. Some deep-sea jellyfish can produce light displays so complex they resemble alien communication systems, flashing patterns that suggest sophisticated information exchange between organisms. The deep-sea siphonophores can create traveling waves of light along their incredibly long bodies. Some specimens have been found that exceed 150 feet in length, making them longer than blue whales, but so delicate they fall apart when brought to the surface. What makes these creatures even more mysterious is their apparent intelligence, despite living in an environment that should make complex neural activity impossible. Some deep-sea octopi exhibit problem-solving abilities that rival their shallow water cousins. Despite living in conditions of crushing pressure, extreme cold, and complete darkness that should make sophisticated brain function impossible. They construct shelters from debris, use tools, and demonstrate memory capabilities that suggest cognitive abilities we're only beginning to understand. The reproductive strategies of deep-sea creatures are so bizarre they challenge our fundamental understanding of biology and evolution. Some species have evolved hermaphroditic capabilities that allow individual organisms to change sex based on environmental conditions or population pressures. Others have developed reproductive cycles that can span decades or even centuries, with some organisms capable of reproducing only once in their entire extended lifespans, but producing thousands of offspring in a single reproductive event. Perhaps most disturbing of all are the giant deep-sea isopods, creatures that look like enormous pill bugs, but can grow to over a foot in length. These armored monsters can survive without food for years, entering a state of metabolic suspension that allows them to wait decades between meals. When they do feed, they can consume enormous amounts of food, sometimes eating so much that they become unable to move, entering a food coma that can last for months. Their survival strategies are so alien to surface biology that they seem to operate on entirely different biological principles. The discovery of completely new types of organisms in the deep ocean continues to challenge our understanding of the tree of life itself. Some deep-sea creatures don't fit into any known taxonomic categories, suggesting that entire branches of evolution have been taking place in the abyss completely independent of surface life. These organisms represent missing links in our understanding of how life on Earth developed, but studying them requires overcoming the same barriers that have kept the deep ocean largely unexplored. The chemical compositions of deep-sea creatures are so unusual, they're providing insights into biochemistry that could revolutionize medicine and biotechnology. Some produce antifreeze proteins that prevent ice crystal formation in their tissues, compounds that could revolutionize organ preservation for transplant surgery. Others produce pressure-resistant enzymes that remain functional under conditions that denature virtually all surface proteins, biotechnology applications that could transform industrial processes. But here's what makes these creatures truly terrifying from an exploration standpoint. Many of them are aggressive predators that have evolved to hunt in the complete darkness of the abyss. Some deep-sea sharks have developed senses so acute they can detect the electrical fields generated by other organisms from vast distances. Others have evolved to hunt using sound, creating acoustic signatures that can track prey through the darkness with deadly precision. The deep ocean isn't just populated by strange creatures. It's filled with highly evolved predators that see submarines and research equipment as potential prey or threats. The size extremes of deep-sea creatures continue to surprise researchers. While some are microscopic organisms that pack impossible capabilities into tiny bodies, others are giants that dwarf their surface relatives. Deep-sea versions of familiar creatures often grow to sizes that seem impossible. Deep-sea giant isopods, enormous amphipods, and squid that reach lengths that border on the mythological. The deep ocean seems to be a place where the normal constraints on organism size don't apply, where creatures can grow to dimensions that would be impossible in surface environments. Perhaps most unsettling is the realization that we've likely discovered only a tiny fraction of the creatures that inhabit the deep ocean. Every new expedition discovers species that have never been seen before, organisms so different from known life forms that they require entirely new categories of biological classification. The deep ocean may contain millions of species that we haven't discovered yet, each one potentially holding secrets about biology, evolution, and the fundamental nature of life that could change our understanding of existence itself. These creatures aren't just obstacles to deep-sea exploration. They're the reason exploration is so important. Each impossible organism represents a solution to survival problems that could revolutionize our understanding of biology, medicine, and biotechnology. But studying them requires us to overcome all the other barriers that make the deep ocean so hostile to human exploration. They live in a realm of crushing pressure, toxic chemistry, extreme temperatures, and absolute darkness, protected by conditions that seem designed to keep us from discovering their secrets. Every encounter with these mysterious deep-sea creatures reminds us that our own planet still holds wonders and terrors that are more alien than anything we might discover among the stars. The greatest minds in engineering and technology have spent decades trying to conquer the deep ocean, pouring billions of dollars into research and development, creating materials that didn't exist before, and pushing the boundaries of human innovation to their absolute limits. Yet despite all our technological achievements, despite putting humans on the moon, building machines that can think, and creating devices that can communicate instantly across the globe, we still cannot build reliable equipment that can survive and function in the deep ocean for more than brief periods. This isn't just a minor engineering challenge. It's a technological barrier so formidable that it makes landing on Mars look like child's play. The fundamental problem facing deep-sea technology isn't any single component or system. It's the brutal reality that every piece of equipment must simultaneously solve multiple, impossible engineering challenges while operating in conditions that actively destroy everything we build. A deep-sea vehicle must be strong enough to resist crushing pressure that could flatten a car, light enough to be deployable from surface ships, sealed tightly enough to keep out corrosive saltwater while maintaining flexibility for thousands of pressure cycles, and sophisticated enough to conduct complex scientific operations in complete darkness using remote controls. No single material or design philosophy can address all these requirements simultaneously, forcing engineers to make compromises that inevitably lead to system failures. The pressure vessels that protect deep-sea equipment represent some of the most advanced materials engineering on the planet, yet they're still woefully inadequate for extended deep ocean operations. The titanium spheres used in the most advanced deep-sea submersibles require walls nearly 2 inches thick just to protect 3 human occupants. These spheres weigh tens of thousands of pounds and can only accommodate the most essential life support systems, leaving virtually no room for scientific equipment or extended mission capabilities. Even with these massive protective shells, the operational depth is severely limited, and any structural flaw or manufacturing defect can result in catastrophic implosion that happens so quickly the occupants wouldn't even realize what hit them. The electronic systems that modern exploration depends on face challenges in the deep ocean that seem almost designed to cause failure. Water and electronics are natural enemies under the best of conditions, but the high-pressure, high-salinity environment of the deep sea makes this conflict exponentially worse. Electrical connections that work perfectly on the surface can fail within hours when exposed to deep-sea conditions, not just from water intrusion, but from pressure-induced changes in the electrical properties of materials. Semiconductors behave differently under extreme pressure, causing computers to malfunction in unpredictable ways. Even components that are supposedly sealed in protective housings can fail due to microscopic pressure differentials that allow saltwater to penetrate through pathways that don't exist under surface conditions. The power requirements for deep-sea operations create an almost insurmountable engineering challenge that gets worse with every technological advance. The lights needed to illuminate the darkness-drained batteries at rates that limit mission duration to hours rather than days. The pumps required to maintain pressure differentials consume enormous amounts of power. The heating systems needed to prevent equipment from freezing in the near-zero temperatures of the deep ocean are constantly fighting a losing battle against water that sucks heat away faster than it can be generated. Even the most advanced battery technology can't provide enough power for extended deep-sea operations, and traditional power generation methods like internal combustion engines or fuel cells face their own set of impossible challenges in the oxygen-poor, high-pressure environment of the abyss. The communication systems that allow surface controllers to operate deep-sea equipment are perhaps the most frustrating technological failures in deep-sea exploration. Radio waves that can travel around the world in milliseconds are completely blocked by just a few feet of seawater. Acoustic communication systems that work reasonably well for submarines become unreliable in the complex acoustic environment of the deep ocean, where temperature gradients, pressure changes, and geological features create sound shadows and distortions that make reliable communication nearly impossible. Many deep-sea missions operate with communication delays measured in minutes rather than seconds, making real-time control of complex operations incredibly difficult and dangerous. The materials science challenges of deep-sea technology extend far beyond simple corrosion resistance. Materials that are perfectly suitable for other extreme environments fail in ways that seem to violate basic engineering principles when exposed to the unique combination of conditions in the deep ocean. Polymers become brittle at low temperatures while simultaneously swelling from pressure effects. Metals develop stress concentrations at weld joints that lead to crack propagation under cyclic pressure loading. Composite materials that should be ideal for deep-sea applications delaminate due to differential thermal expansion between fiber and matrix materials. Even ceramics, which should be immune to corrosion, can suffer from pressure-induced phase changes that alter their fundamental properties. The mechanical systems required for deep-sea operations face challenges that make surface engineering look trivial by comparison. Hydraulic systems that work flawlessly on land become sluggish and unreliable when hydraulic fluid thickens in the extreme cold of the deep ocean. Seals and gaskets that provide perfect protection at atmospheric pressure can extrude and fail under the differential pressures experienced during deep-sea operations. Moving parts that operate smoothly on the surface can bind or jam due to thermal contraction effects combined with pressure-induced dimensional changes. Simple mechanisms like bolts and fasteners can cold weld together under deep-sea conditions, making equipment maintenance impossible, even when components haven't actually failed. The sensor systems that deep-sea exploration depends on for navigation and scientific measurement are constantly fighting environmental conditions that interfere with their operation. Magnetic compasses become unreliable due to magnetic anomalies in the ocean floor and interference from the metallic hulls of submersibles. Inertial navigation systems drift over time and can't be corrected using GPS signals that can't penetrate seawater. Optical sensors are limited by the extremely short range of artificial lights in the absolute darkness of the deep ocean. Even basic measurements, like temperature and pressure, become challenging when sensors must be protected from the corrosive environment while still maintaining contact with the surrounding water. The robotic systems used for deep-sea manipulation and sample collection represent some of the most sophisticated remote-operated technology on Earth, yet they're still primitive compared to what's needed for effective deep-sea exploration. The time delays in communication make real-time teleoperation nearly impossible, requiring autonomous systems that can make complex decisions without human input. But autonomous systems require sophisticated sensors and computing power that are vulnerable to all the environmental hazards of the deep ocean. The result is robotic systems that can perform only the most basic operations and frequently fail at critical moments when human judgment would be essential for mission success. The integration challenges of deep-sea technology are often more difficult than the individual component challenges. Systems that work perfectly when tested individually can fail catastrophically when integrated into complete vehicles due to unexpected interactions between components under deep-sea conditions. Electrical systems can interfere with magnetic sensors in ways that don't occur during surface testing. Hydraulic systems can create vibrations that damage sensitive electronics. Thermal management systems can create temperature gradients that cause materials to expand and contract in ways that compromise structural integrity. Every deep-sea vehicle is essentially a prototype because the interactions between systems under actual deep-sea conditions can't be fully predicted or tested in surface facilities. The software and control systems for deep-sea operations must account for failure modes and environmental conditions that don't exist in any other application. Control algorithms that work perfectly in simulated environments can behave unpredictably when sensors provide readings that fall outside the expected ranges due to deep-sea environmental effects. Safety systems designed to protect equipment and crew must make split-second decisions based on incomplete information from sensors that may themselves be malfunctioning. The software must be robust enough to continue operating even when multiple systems are failing simultaneously, yet sophisticated enough to conduct complex scientific operations in an environment where human oversight is limited by communication delays and technical constraints. Perhaps most frustrating of all, the rapid pace of technological advancement in other fields often makes deep-sea technology obsolete before it can be fully developed and deployed. The years required to design, build, test, and deploy deep-sea systems mean that by the time a vehicle reaches operational status, many of its components are based on technology that's already been superseded by newer developments. But the extreme qualification requirements for deep-sea equipment mean that newer technology can't simply be swapped in. Every component must go through extensive testing and validation processes that take additional years to complete. The economic realities of deep-sea technology development create a vicious cycle that limits progress in the field. The small market for deep-sea equipment means that specialized components are incredibly expensive, often costing hundreds of times more than equivalent components designed for surface use. The high costs limit the number of vehicles that can be built, which keeps the market small and prices high. The result is that deep-sea exploration is limited to a handful of vehicles worldwide, each one representing millions of dollars of investment that must be protected at all costs, limiting the willingness to take the technological risks that would be necessary to achieve breakthrough improvements in capability. As we continue our exploration of the barriers preventing deep-sea exploration, remember that the technology challenge isn't just about building better equipment. It's about fundamentally rethinking how we approach engineering for extreme environments. The deep ocean represents the ultimate stress test for human technology, a proving ground where our most advanced engineering achievements routinely fail in ways that humble even the most experienced engineers and remind us that despite all our technological progress, there are still environments on our own planet that remain largely beyond our reach. Here's a number that will shock you to your core. It costs more money to send a human to the bottom of the ocean for a few hours than it does to send them to space for several days. While a ticket on a commercial spaceflight might cost you a few $100,000, a single dive to the deep ocean floor can cost upwards of $10 million. And that's just for the basic mission without any major scientific equipment or extended operations. This isn't just expensive. This is so prohibitively costly that it makes deep-sea exploration accessible only to the wealthiest nations and organizations on Earth, creating a financial barrier that's arguably more insurmountable than all the technical challenges combined. The astronomical costs of deep-sea exploration begin with the vehicles themselves, which represent some of the most expensive pieces of equipment ever built by humanity. A single deep-sea submersible, capable of reaching the ocean's deepest trenches, costs between $50 and $100 million to design, build, and test. To put this in perspective, that's more than the cost of building a space shuttle, more than most countries' entire annual space budgets, and enough money to fund hundreds of surface research projects. The limiting factor, one of the few submersibles capable of reaching the bottom of any ocean trench, cost over $37 million just for the pressure sphere and basic systems before adding any scientific equipment or operational capabilities. But the initial purchase price is just the beginning of the financial nightmare that is deep sea exploration. The operational costs for these vehicles are so extreme they make luxury yachts look economical. Every dive requires a support ship that can cost $50,000 per day to operate, complete with specialized crews, dynamic positioning systems, and launch and recovery equipment that adds millions more to the total cost. The Titan submersible, which tragically imploded during a dive to the Titanic, charged passengers $250,000 each for a single dive, and that was considered a bargain in the deep-sea exploration world. The insurance costs alone for deep-sea operations are enough to bankrupt most organizations. Lloyd's of London and other specialized insurers charge premiums that can exceed 20% of the vehicle's total value for a single mission, reflecting the extreme risks and high probability of equipment loss in deep-sea operations. Many deep-sea vehicles operate without insurance because the premiums are simply too high to be economically viable, meaning that a single equipment failure can result in total financial loss for the organizations involved. The specialized materials required for deep-sea construction drive costs to levels that seem almost criminal. Titanium, the metal of choice for deep-sea pressure vessels, costs over $30 per pound in raw form, but the specialized titanium alloys required for deep-sea use can cost over $100 per pound. The forging and machining of these materials requires specialized facilities and techniques that add additional cost multipliers. A single titanium viewing port for a deep-sea submersible can cost over $1 million, and that's just for a window less than 2 feet in diameter. The research and development costs for deep-sea technology are staggering because every component must be essentially invented from scratch for the unique demands of the deep ocean environment. Unlike space technology, where there's a large military and commercial market to share development costs, deep-sea technology serves such a small market that every vehicle must essentially fund its own technological development. The cost of developing new materials, testing procedures, and manufacturing techniques is spread across so few units that individual components can cost thousands of times more than their surface equivalents. The testing and qualification costs for deep-sea equipment add another layer of financial burden that makes development almost impossible for smaller organizations. Every component must undergo extensive pressure testing, corrosion testing, and environmental testing that can cost millions of dollars and take years to complete. The pressure testing alone requires specialized facilities that exist in only a handful of locations worldwide, creating bottlenecks and additional costs for scheduling and logistics. Many promising deep-sea technologies never make it to operational status simply because the testing costs exceed the development budgets. The human resources costs for deep-sea exploration are astronomical because of the specialized knowledge and training required for operations in such an extreme environment. Deep-sea pilots require years of training and certification processes that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. Support crews must be trained in specialized procedures for handling equipment worth tens of millions of dollars in conditions where a single mistake can result in loss of life and complete mission failure. The liability insurance for personnel involved in deep-sea operations can cost more per person than most people earn in an entire year. The logistical costs of getting deep-sea equipment to operational sites are often overlooked, but can represent a major portion of the total mission budget. Deep-sea vehicles are so large and specialized that they require custom transportation systems to move them from construction facilities to deployment sites. The support ships required for deep-sea operations are so specialized that they must often be chartered from locations thousands of miles away, with daily charter rates that exceed the annual budgets of most research institutions. Even getting to remote deep-sea sites can require weeks of transit time at costs that accumulate to millions of dollars before any actual exploration begins. The maintenance and repair costs for deep-sea equipment are nightmare scenarios that can bankrupt entire research programs. Because deep-sea equipment operates in such extreme conditions, failure rates are high and repair costs are astronomical. A simple seal failure that would cost hundreds of dollars to fix and surface equipment can require complete vehicle disassembly and months of work in specialized facilities. When it occurs in deep-sea equipment, many components are so specialized that replacement parts must be manufactured individually at costs that can exceed the original equipment price. The opportunity costs of deep-sea exploration are staggering when compared to what the same money could accomplish in other research fields. The cost of a single deep-sea mission could fund hundreds of surface oceanographic research projects, thousands of laboratory experiments, or entire research programs in other fields. Universities and research institutions must make agonizing decisions about whether the potential scientific returns from deep-sea exploration justify the enormous costs when the same funds could support dozens of other research projects with more predictable outcomes. The international politics of deep-sea exploration costs create additional financial barriers that compound the already extreme equipment and operational costs. Because deep-sea technology has potential military applications, export controls and technology transfer restrictions limit international cooperation and force each country to duplicate expensive development efforts. Nations that want to participate in deep-sea exploration must either pay premium prices to access existing technology or invest billions of dollars in developing their own capabilities from scratch. The commercial market for deep-sea exploration services is so small and specialized that it can't support the economies of scale that would reduce costs in other industries. Unlike aerospace, where military and commercial applications create large markets that can support extensive manufacturing infrastructure, deep-sea exploration serves such a tiny market that every vehicle is essentially a custom-built prototype. This means that costs never come down through mass production or learning curve effects that reduce prices in other high-tech industries. The financing challenges for deep-sea exploration projects create additional costs through complex funding structures and risk management requirements. Because traditional lenders won't finance such high-risk, high-cost projects, deep-sea exploration often requires complex partnerships between government agencies, research institutions, and private investors, each with their own requirements and cost structures. The legal and administrative costs of structuring these deals can add millions of dollars to project costs before any actual hardware is built. The depreciation and obsolescence costs for deep-sea equipment are particularly brutal because of the rapid pace of technological change combined with the long development times for deep-sea systems. By the time a deep-sea vehicle reaches operational status, many of its components are already obsolete, but the qualification requirements mean that upgrading to newer technology requires starting the entire development and testing process over again. This creates a situation where organizations are forced to operate with outdated technology that becomes increasingly expensive to maintain and support. Perhaps most frustrating of all is the realization that the extreme costs of deep-sea exploration create a vicious cycle that prevents the kind of routine operations that could eventually bring costs down. Because each mission is so expensive, organizations can't afford to take the risks or conduct the routine operations that would build experience and develop more efficient procedures. Instead, every mission becomes a precious high-stakes operation where safety concerns and risk aversion actually increase costs and reduce the learning opportunities that could eventually make deep-sea exploration more affordable. The economic reality is that deep-sea exploration costs have actually increased over time rather than decreasing as technology has advanced. This is the opposite of most technological fields, where costs decrease as technology matures and manufacturing volumes increase. In deep-sea exploration, the costs have increased because our ambitions have outpaced our technological capabilities, forcing us to develop ever more sophisticated and expensive solutions to reach deeper and stay longer in an environment that fights back harder with every advance we make. As we continue exploring the barriers that keep the deep ocean mysterious, remember that the cost factor isn't just about money. It's about the fundamental economic reality that makes deep-sea exploration accessible only to the most well-funded organizations on Earth, limiting our exploration of the largest habitat on our planet to a privileged few who can afford the astronomical costs of venturing into the abyss. Beneath the crushing depths of the ocean lies a world in constant geological turmoil that makes the surface of our planet look like a peaceful garden in comparison. The deep ocean floor isn't just a static landscape covered in sediment. It's an active battleground where tectonic plates collide with forces that dwarf nuclear explosions, where underwater volcanoes can erupt without warning and instantly vaporize anything within miles, and where the very ground beneath explorers can literally disappear in landslides that move billions of tons of material faster than a speeding bullet. These geological dangers don't just threaten equipment and human life. They represent fundamental forces of planetary destruction operating on scales so massive they challenge human comprehension. The most terrifying aspect of deep-sea geological dangers is their complete unpredictability and the speed at which they can transform a routine exploration mission into a death trap. Underwater earthquakes in the deep ocean can reach magnitudes that exceed anything recorded on land, generating seismic forces that can crush submarines like tin cans or bury them under avalanches of sediment in seconds. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake, which generated the devastating tsunami that hit Japan, originated on the ocean floor and released energy equivalent to 600 million times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Submarines operating in the area during such an event would have no chance of survival. They would be simultaneously crushed by pressure waves, buried by sediment slides, and potentially vaporized by underwater volcanic activity triggered by the seismic event. The Ring of Fire, the zone of intense seismic and volcanic activity that circles the Pacific Ocean, creates underwater geological hazards that operate on scales difficult to comprehend. Underwater volcanoes along this ring can erupt with explosive forces that create pressure waves powerful enough to implode submarines from miles away. These eruptions don't just threaten immediate destruction. They can alter the entire chemical and physical environment of vast areas of the ocean floor in minutes, Lava flows on the ocean floor can reach temperatures exceeding 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt copper instantly, while simultaneously releasing toxic gases and creating pressure waves that can be detected thousands of miles away. Underwater landslides represent perhaps the most insidious geological threat because they can occur without any warning signs that surface-based monitoring systems can detect. The continental slopes that drop from shallow coastal areas to the deep ocean floor are inherently unstable, held in place only by the friction between sediment particles and the cohesive strength of deep-sea mud. When this equilibrium is disturbed by earthquakes, volcanic activity, or even the passage of submarines, entire mountainsides of sediment can collapse in catastrophic failures that move billions of cubic feet of material at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The Storegga slide, which occurred off the coast of Norway approximately 8,000 years ago, moved an area of sediment the size of Scotland in a single catastrophic event that generated tsunamis reaching heights of over 60 feet when they reached the coastlines of Britain and Norway. If a similar event occurred today in a major deep-sea exploration area, it would instantly bury any submarines or equipment in the region under hundreds of feet of sediment, creating tombs that would be impossible to locate or recover. The geological evidence suggests that such massive underwater landslides occur regularly on geological timescales, meaning that any deep-sea exploration takes place in areas that are essentially ticking time bombs of geological instability. Hydrothermal vent fields represent geological hazards that combine extreme temperature, toxic chemistry, and structural instability in ways that create multiple simultaneous threats to deep-sea explorers. These vents aren't stable geological features. They can appear suddenly when new cracks open in the ocean floor, disappear just as quickly when geological shifts seal off their heat sources, and change their chemical output without warning as subsurface conditions change. The geological forces that create these vents operate under pressures and temperatures that can shift rapidly, turning a stable exploration site into a death trap within hours. The mineral deposits that form around hydrothermal vents create geological structures that are both incredibly valuable scientifically and extremely dangerous to approach. These deposits, called black smokers and white smokers, depending on their chemical composition, can grow rapidly into towering spires that are structurally unstable and prone to collapse without warning. The collapse of these structures can create underwater avalanches of toxic minerals and superheated water that can overwhelm nearby exploration equipment. Some of these mineral spires have been found to reach heights of over 180 feet, making them underwater skyscrapers that could topple and crush submarines operating in their vicinity. Methane hydrate deposits scattered across the ocean floor represent geological time bombs that can explode with devastating force when disturbed by seismic activity or changes in temperature and pressure. These crystalline structures, which look deceptively harmless, can release massive amounts of natural gas in explosive decompression events that have been linked to some of the most mysterious disappearances of ships and submarines in deep-sea areas. The Bermuda Triangle and other areas known for unexplained disappearances often coincide with regions of high methane hydrate concentration, suggesting that these geological hazards may be responsible for more maritime disasters than previously understood. The abyssal plains, which cover vast areas of the deep ocean floor and appear to be stable and safe exploration areas, hide their own geological dangers beneath seemingly innocent layers of sediment. These plains are often crossed by active fault lines that can generate earthquakes without surface warning, creating sudden changes in topography that can trap submarines in newly formed valleys or crush them against newly uplifted ridges. The sediment layers themselves can conceal unstable geological formations, underwater cliffs, and volcanic vents that pose immediate dangers to any equipment operating near the ocean floor. Seamounts, the underwater mountains that dot the deep ocean landscape, present navigation hazards that are compounded by their geological instability. Many seamounts are actually extinct or dormant volcanoes that can suddenly return to active status without warning, creating instant geological hazards where none existed before. The steep slopes of seamounts are prone to landslides and rockfalls that can occur spontaneously due to changes in water temperature, seismic activity, or even the pressure waves created by passing submarines. Navigation around seamounts requires constant vigilance because their magnetic properties can interfere with compass systems, and their irregular shapes can create acoustic shadows that make sonar navigation unreliable. Oceanic trenches, the deepest parts of the world's oceans, represent the most geologically active and dangerous environments on Earth. These trenches are formed by tectonic plate subduction, where one crustal plate is forced beneath another in a process that generates continuous seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, and massive geological instability. The walls of these trenches are continuously collapsing and reforming, creating an environment where the landscape can change dramatically between visits. Equipment left on the floor of oceanic trenches has been found buried, crushed, or completely relocated by geological activity that occurred in the span of just months. The Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of the world's oceans, is not just a static depression in the ocean floor, but an active geological system where the Pacific Plate is being subducted beneath the Philippine Sea Plate at a rate of about 2 to 3 inches per year. This ongoing collision generates continuous micro-earthquakes, occasional major seismic events, and volcanic activity that makes the trench floor one of the most geologically unstable places on Earth. The pressure at these depths is so extreme that even minor geological shifts can create pressure waves that would be instantly fatal to any human-occupied vehicle. Underwater mud volcanoes represent a particularly insidious geological hazard because they can appear suddenly in areas that previously showed no signs of geological activity. These formations, created by the eruption of liquid mud, water, and gases from deep beneath the ocean floor, can change the topography of large areas overnight and release toxic gases that can poison the water column for miles around their eruption sites. Some underwater mud volcanoes have been found to erupt continuously for years, creating constantly changing hazards that make navigation and exploration extremely dangerous. Salt diapires, massive underground formations of salt that can push through the ocean floor under extreme geological pressure, create geological hazards that are nearly impossible to predict or avoid. When these salt formations breach the ocean floor, they can create sudden changes in topography, alter local chemistry through salt dissolution, and generate pressure waves that can damage nearby equipment. The Gulf of Mexico, a major area for deep-sea exploration and drilling, is riddled with salt diapirs that have been responsible for numerous equipment failures and navigational hazards. Perhaps most terrifying of all is the realization that our understanding of deep-sea geology is so limited that we may be unaware of entire categories of geological hazards that operate in the deep ocean environment. The geological processes that occur under extreme pressure and in the absence of air operate according to principles that may be fundamentally different from surface geology. Every deep-sea geological survey discovers new formations, new processes, and new hazards that weren't predicted by surface-based geological models, suggesting that the deep ocean may hold geological surprises that could prove far more dangerous than anything we've discovered so far. As we continue our exploration of the barriers preventing deep-sea exploration, remember that geological dangers aren't just occasional hazards to be avoided. They're fundamental characteristics of a planet where the most powerful geological forces operate in the hidden realm beneath our feet, creating an environment where the ground itself is an enemy that can strike without warning, with forces that make human technology seem pathetically fragile in comparison. Imagine trying to explore an alien world where every step you take might be your last. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death, and every piece of equipment you depend on could fail without warning. And then imagine trying to do all of this while being completely cut off from any possibility of help, advice, or even basic communication with the rest of humanity. This is the terrifying reality of deep-sea exploration, where the ocean itself creates a communication barrier so complete and so impenetrable that submarines entering the deep sea are essentially traveling to another planet, isolated from all contact with the surface world by physics that make reliable communication nearly impossible. The fundamental problem with deep-sea communication isn't just a minor technical inconvenience. It's a complete breakdown of the electromagnetic spectrum that modern civilization depends on for virtually all forms of communication. Radio waves, which can travel around the Earth in milliseconds and reach spacecraft millions of miles away, are completely absorbed by seawater within just a few feet of the surface. The same electromagnetic radiation that allows you to talk to someone on the other side of the planet instantly becomes utterly useless the moment it encounters the conductive medium of saltwater, creating an electromagnetic shadow that cuts deep-sea explorers off from the rest of humanity more completely than if they were traveling to Mars. This electromagnetic blackout isn't just about losing radio contact. It represents the failure of virtually every communication technology that surface dwellers take for granted. GPS signals, which provide precise positioning information anywhere on Earth's surface, cannot penetrate seawater at all, leaving deep-sea explorers to navigate using methods that would have been familiar to mariners centuries ago. Satellite communication, cellular networks, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and every other form of wireless communication simply ceases to exist once you descend below the first few feet of ocean water. The deep ocean is the most complete communication dead zone on Earth, more isolated from the global communication network than the most remote locations on any continent. The acoustic communication systems that submarines use to communicate underwater work on principles completely different from electromagnetic communication, and they come with their own set of devastating limitations that make real-time communication virtually impossible. Sound waves travel through water much more slowly than electromagnetic waves travel through air, creating communication delays that can stretch to minutes rather than milliseconds. A simple request for instructions from a submarine on the ocean floor might take several minutes to reach the surface, several more minutes for surface controllers to process and respond, and several more minutes for the response to travel back to the submarine. By the time help arrives, a critical situation could have already become a fatal one. But the delays are just the beginning of the acoustic communication nightmare. The deep ocean is an incredibly complex acoustic environment where sound waves behave in ways that seem to violate common sense and make reliable communication nearly impossible. Temperature gradients in the water create acoustic layers that can trap sound waves, preventing them from reaching the surface at all. Pressure changes at different depths alter the speed of sound, creating distortions that can make voice communication unintelligible. The irregular topography of the ocean floor creates acoustic shadows and reflection patterns that can bounce messages in completely wrong directions, sending desperate calls for help to empty expanses of ocean rather than to surface support ships. The ocean's natural acoustic environment is so noisy and chaotic that it often drowns out communication attempts entirely. Underwater earthquakes generate acoustic signals that can overpower communication systems from thousands of miles away. Marine life, from tiny shrimp to massive whales, creates a constant background of biological noise that interferes with acoustic communication. Even the thermal noise generated by water molecules moving under pressure creates a background hiss that limits the range and clarity of underwater acoustic systems. It's like trying to have a whispered conversation in the middle of a rock concert while standing behind a waterfall. The power requirements for underwater acoustic communication are staggering compared to electromagnetic communication, creating yet another barrier to reliable deep-sea communication. While a cell phone can communicate with satellites using milliwatts of power, underwater acoustic communication systems require hundreds of watts to achieve even short-range communication in the deep ocean environment. This massive power requirement means that every minute of communication drains precious battery reserves that could be used for life support, propulsion, or critical systems operation. Deep-sea explorers must choose between staying in communication and staying alive, a choice that often forces them into complete communication silence to conserve power for survival. The bandwidth limitations of acoustic communication make it impossible to transmit the kind of detailed information that surface operations take for granted. While surface communication systems can transmit high-definition video, detailed telemetry, and complex data streams, in real time, underwater acoustic systems are limited to simple text messages, basic status updates, and minimal data transmission. A single photograph that could be transmitted from a spacecraft to Earth in seconds might take hours to transmit from the ocean floor to the surface, assuming the acoustic conditions allow transmission at all. This bandwidth limitation means that surface controllers often have no real understanding of what's happening in the deep ocean, making informed decision-making nearly impossible. The reliability problems with underwater acoustic communication create situations where explorers can't depend on their communication systems when they need them most. Acoustic systems that work perfectly in calm, shallow water can fail completely when subjected to the complex acoustic environment of the deep ocean. Temperature changes can shift acoustic frequencies out of the operational range of communication equipment. Marine life can interfere with acoustic signals in ways that cause complete communication blackouts. Even the movement of the submarine itself can create acoustic interference that makes communication impossible while the vehicle is in motion. Emergency communication in the deep ocean faces challenges that make surface emergency communication look trivial by comparison. When a deep-sea vehicle experiences an emergency, the communication systems often fail at the same time as other critical systems, leaving surface controllers with no information about the nature or severity of the emergency. Even when communication systems continue to function, the delays inherent in acoustic communication mean that emergency responders on the surface may not learn about a crisis until it's too late to provide meaningful assistance. The Titan submersible disaster tragically illustrated this problem. By the time surface controllers realized something was wrong, the emergency was already over. The psychological impact of communication, isolation on deep-sea explorers cannot be understated. Humans are fundamentally social creatures who depend on communication with others for psychological well-being and rational decision-making. When explorers are cut off from communication with the surface world, they experience a form of psychological isolation that's more complete than almost any other human experience. This isolation can lead to poor decision-making, panic responses, and psychological breakdown that can be just as dangerous as any technical failure. Some deep-sea explorers have reported feeling completely alone in the universe during communication blackouts, experiencing existential terror that goes far beyond normal claustrophobia or fear. The navigation problems created by communication blackout extend far beyond simple position-finding difficulties. Without GPS or other electromagnetic navigation aids, deep-sea vehicles must rely on inertial navigation systems that drift over time and can't be corrected without surface communication. Dead reckoning navigation, which works reasonably well for surface vessels over short distances, becomes increasingly unreliable over the long distances and extended time periods typical of deep-sea missions. Many deep-sea vehicles have become completely lost due to navigation errors compounded by communication failures that prevented surface controllers from providing navigation assistance. The coordination problems created by communication blackout make complex deep-sea operations nearly impossible to execute successfully. Surface support operations depend on real-time communication to coordinate ship positioning, weather monitoring, and emergency response. When communication with deep-sea vehicles is limited or unreliable, surface controllers must make critical decisions based on outdated information or complete lack of information. This communication isolation has been responsible for numerous mission failures, where surface support was unable to provide necessary assistance because they didn't know what assistance was needed. The technological solutions being developed to address deep-sea communication challenges face their own set of seemingly insurmountable problems. Fiber optic tethers can provide high-bandwidth communication, but severely limit vehicle mobility and are vulnerable to breakage under the extreme conditions of deep-sea operations. Relay systems using intermediate communication nodes require multiple vehicles and coordination systems that are themselves vulnerable to the same communication problems they're trying to solve. Quantum communication systems, while theoretically promising, face practical implementation challenges that may take decades to overcome. Perhaps most frustrating of all is the realization that the communication blackout problem actually gets worse as technology advances in other areas. More sophisticated deep-sea vehicles require more communication bandwidth to transmit telemetry and control data. More complex missions require more coordination and real-time decision-making. The gap between what we need to communicate and what we can actually communicate in the deep ocean environment is growing wider rather than narrower, creating a communication crisis that threatens to limit deep-sea exploration just as we're developing the technology to explore deeper and stay longer than ever before. The strategic implications of the communication blackout extend beyond scientific exploration to military and commercial operations in the deep ocean. Submarine warfare, underwater resource extraction, and deep-sea rescue operations all face the same fundamental communication challenges that make coordination and control extremely difficult. Nations investing in deep-sea capabilities must accept that their most advanced underwater assets will be operating in a communication environment that's more isolated than space, where help from the surface world may be impossible even when it's desperately needed. As we near the end of our exploration of the barriers that keep the deep sea mysterious, remember that the communication blackout isn't just about technology failing. It's about human beings venturing into an environment where they become more isolated from their own species than astronauts traveling to other planets, cut off from the communication networks that define modern civilization, and forced to confront the abyss with only their own resources and the uncertain hope that their messages home might somehow penetrate the vast silence of the deep. Despite all the crushing barriers we've explored, the impossible pressure, the deadly temperatures, the toxic environment, the absolute darkness, the corrosive salt water, the mysterious creatures, the technological failures, the astronomical costs, the geological dangers, and the communication blackouts, humanity has managed to achieve breakthrough discoveries in the deep ocean that have fundamentally changed our understanding of life, our planet, and our place in the universe. These discoveries are so profound, so revolutionary, and so completely unexpected that they've forced scientists to rewrite textbooks, reconsider the origins of life itself, and confront the possibility that everything we thought we knew about biology was based on studying less than 5% of the habitable space on our own planet. The discovery of chemosynthetic ecosystems around hydrothermal vents in 1977 represented one of the most shocking scientific revelations in human history, completely overturning our fundamental understanding of how life works on Earth. For the entire history of biological science, we believed that all complex life depended ultimately on photosynthesis, that the sun was the ultimate energy source for every living thing on our planet. Then, in the crushing depths, where sunlight has never penetrated, scientists discovered thriving ecosystems more abundant and diverse than many surface environments, powered entirely by chemical energy from the Earth's interior. These ecosystems don't just survive without sunlight. They thrive in conditions that should be instantly lethal to any known form of life, creating biological communities so alien they might as well exist on another planet. The organisms living around these hydrothermal vents have forced us to completely reconsider the limits of life itself. Giant tube worms reaching lengths of 8 feet with no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system, sustained entirely by symbiotic bacteria that convert deadly hydrogen sulfide into food. Eyeless shrimp that navigate by detecting infrared radiation from volcanic vents, using sensory capabilities that seem to violate the basic principles of biology. Bacteria that thrive at temperatures exceeding 250 degrees Fahrenheit, living in water so hot it would cook most surface organisms instantly. These discoveries haven't just expanded our understanding of biodiversity. They've revealed that life can exist in ways we never imagined possible, suggesting that the universe might be far more hospitable to life than we ever dared to hope. The implications of these chemosynthetic ecosystems extend far beyond marine biology into astrobiology and our search for life elsewhere in the universe. If life can thrive in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans without any dependence on solar energy, then similar life could exist in the subsurface oceans of Europa, Enceladus, and other moons in our solar system, where liquid water exists beneath ice shells. The discovery of deep sea life has essentially doubled or tripled the number of potentially habitable worlds in our solar system alone, suggesting that life might be far more common throughout the universe than we previously believed possible. Recent deep-sea discoveries have revealed entire ecosystems that operate on timescales completely different from surface life, challenging our understanding of biological processes and evolutionary rates. Some deep-sea clams and tube worms have been found to live for hundreds of years, with some specimens potentially reaching ages of over 500 years. These organisms grow incredibly slowly, reproduce infrequently, and seem to exist in a state of biological time suspension that makes their ecosystems some of the most stable and long-lasting on Earth. The discovery of such extreme longevity in deep-sea organisms has implications for aging research, cancer biology, and our understanding of cellular repair mechanisms that could revolutionize human medicine. The discovery of deep-sea coral reefs in areas where coral reefs were thought to be impossible has revealed that our oceans contain vast ecosystems we never knew existed. These cold-water coral reefs, thriving in the dark depths without any algal symbionts, create complex three-dimensional habitats that support biodiversity levels comparable to tropical coral reefs. Some of these deep-sea reefs have been found to be thousands of years old, representing some of the oldest continuously existing ecosystems on Earth. The discovery of these reefs has fundamentally changed our understanding of coral biology and has revealed that our oceans contain far more complex habitats than we ever imagined. Perhaps most shocking of all recent deep-sea discoveries is the realization that the deep ocean contains what may be the largest continuous ecosystem on Earth. The abyssal plains, once thought to be biological deserts, have been found to support complex food webs and biodiversity levels that rival many surface ecosystems. Microscopic organisms in deep-sea sediments may represent the largest biomass of any single ecosystem on our planet, suggesting that most of Earth's life actually exists in the deep ocean rather than on the surface where we can easily observe it. This discovery has forced us to reconsider fundamental questions about the distribution of life on Earth and the relative importance of different ecosystems in global biological processes. Recent technological breakthroughs have enabled discoveries that reveal the deep ocean's role in regulating Earth's climate and chemistry in ways that dwarf the influence of surface processes. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents have been found to be major sources of minerals and chemicals that influence ocean chemistry on a global scale. The deep ocean's role in carbon sequestration is far more complex and important than previously understood, with deep-sea sediments representing one of Earth's largest carbon reservoirs. These discoveries have revealed that the deep ocean isn't just a remote environment separate from surface processes. It's an integral part of Earth's climate system that directly influences weather patterns, atmospheric composition, and global temperature regulation. The discovery of new forms of matter and unusual physical phenomena in the deep ocean has challenged our understanding of physics and chemistry under extreme conditions. Deep-sea environments create conditions where water behaves in ways that don't match surface-based physics models, where pressure creates new forms of ice that exist at temperatures well above normal freezing points, and where chemical reactions proceed through pathways that can't be replicated in surface laboratories. These discoveries have implications for materials, science, industrial chemistry, and our understanding of how matter behaves under extreme conditions that might exist on other planets or in other environments throughout the universe. Recent deep-sea expeditions have discovered evidence of geological processes that operate on scales far larger than anything observed on the surface, revealing that our planet's interior is far more active and dynamic than previously understood. Massive underwater mountain ranges, underwater rivers flowing along the ocean floor, and geological formations that dwarf anything on the continents have been discovered in areas that were previously thought to be geologically inactive. These discoveries have revealed that most of Earth's active geology actually occurs underwater, hidden from surface observation, but playing crucial roles in planetary processes that affect everything from continental drift to volcanic activity. The discovery of deep-sea mining deposits containing rare earth elements and precious metals in concentrations far exceeding anything found on land has revealed that the ocean floor may contain the largest mineral wealth on Earth. Polymetallic nodules scattered across abyssal plains contain cobalt, nickel, and other critical materials in quantities that could supply human civilization for centuries. These discoveries have created new industries and geopolitical considerations, but they've also revealed the potential for human activities to impact deep-sea ecosystems that we're only beginning to understand. Perhaps most intriguingly, recent deep-sea discoveries have revealed evidence of biological processes that might represent entirely new domains of life. Microorganisms found in deep-sea sediments appear to use metabolic pathways that don't fit into any known categories of life, suggesting that our classification of life into bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes may be incomplete. Some of these organisms appear to use quantum mechanical processes for energy transfer, representing a form of biology that operates on principles we're only beginning to understand. These discoveries suggest that the deep ocean may contain forms of life so fundamentally different from surface organisms that they represent separate evolutionary lineages that have been developing independently for billions of years. The technological breakthroughs that have enabled these discoveries are themselves revolutionary, representing advances in materials, science, robotics, and exploration techniques that have applications far beyond deep-sea research. The development of pressure-resistant electronics, advanced materials that can withstand extreme corrosion, and robotic systems that can operate autonomously in completely unknown environments have created technologies that are being applied to space exploration, industrial processes, and medical devices. Every advance in deep-sea exploration technology creates capabilities that benefit other fields of human endeavor. Recent discoveries have also revealed that the deep ocean plays a crucial role in regulating processes that affect all life on Earth, from the production of oxygen to the regulation of global temperature. Deep-sea biological processes consume vast amounts of carbon dioxide, produce significant quantities of oxygen, and influence atmospheric composition in ways that directly affect climate and weather patterns worldwide. Understanding these processes is crucial for predicting and managing climate change, making deep-sea research not just scientifically interesting, but essential for human survival in a changing world. The rate of new discoveries in the deep ocean continues to accelerate, with every expedition revealing new species, new ecosystems, and new phenomena that challenge our existing understanding of biology, geology, and chemistry. Scientists estimate that we've discovered less than 1% of the species that live in the deep ocean, meaning that the vast majority of life on our planet remains completely unknown to science. Each barrier we overcome in deep-sea exploration doesn't just reveal answers, it reveals entire new categories of questions we never knew existed. As we conclude our journey through the barriers that have kept the deep sea mysterious for so long, remember that every obstacle we've discussed, from crushing pressure to communication blackouts, has been overcome by human ingenuity and determination to reveal wonders that have changed our understanding of life, our planet, and our universe. The discoveries we've made despite these incredible barriers suggest that the secrets still hidden in the unexplored depths may be even more revolutionary than anything we've found so far. If this exploration into Earth's final frontier has amazed you as much as it has amazed the scientists making these discoveries, subscribe to the Sleepy Cosmos and join our community of cosmic explorers as we continue to uncover the mysteries that surround us, from the deepest trenches of our oceans to the farthest reaches of space, because the universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered by curious minds willing to look beyond the surface of what we think we know.